Spoilers for Marvel's Guardians of the Galaxy in this video. You have been warned. Marvel's Guardians of the Galaxy has a surprising amount of emotional maturity. While this Eidos Montreal action-adventure game has been lauded for its fun gameplay and sharp humorous wit, check out my review if you don't believe me, the title's true strength is due to its emotional core, where its spacefaring heroes in Peter Quill, Gamora, Rocket, Drax, and Groot are stuck in a true moral conundrum. A quandary where an invasive alien presence forces them to decide if they want to live in a fake world inside their heads where all their intense emotional pain has been nullified and their lost and deceased loved ones come back to life, or if they'd rather stay in the unpredictable and painful real world with all the hard truths that it entails in order to save the galaxy from this invasive alien enemy. And for their part, the Guardians of the Galaxy reject this fake reality because despite their bumbling ways, bad plans, and character deficiencies, they are heroes at their very core. They believe the real reality trumps the fake one, no matter how painful and difficult it is. This narrative reflects a core theme in Marvel's Guardians of the Galaxy, a theme where our morally complicated heroes must grapple with morally complicated predicaments, ones where they have to dialectically accept that real life is not sunshine, rainbows, and puppies chasing butterflies. Predicaments where our heroes understand that living is hard and painful, just like watching the Chicago Bears, because they suck. The most noticeable moral conundrums our heroes face in the game is in the portrayal of their various false promises. When they are infected by the invasive alien species, they are transported to a dream world where their pain has been nullified. This can be a world where they exist in a happier time of their lives. For others like Cosmo, the telepathic space dog, their visions are about simple pleasures like chasing tennis balls, because even psychic golden retrievers gotta retrieve. But the most notable of these visions involve the Guardians of the Galaxy themselves. Quill's vision features his deceased mother coming back to life, and Drax's dream reality involves his wife and child returning from the dead. And between both Peter and Drax, they need to break free of these desirable delusions in order to save the galaxy, which is easier said than done. After all, grief is a monumentally difficult emotion to overcome, and speaking as someone who is currently grieving the death of a friend, it's really difficult to accept that she's gone, that we live in a world that she is no longer in. And with that in mind, Peter Quill's and Drax's reluctance to forsake the make-believe reality where their loved ones are still alive is incredibly relatable. For those who have lost loved ones, we understand the emotional toll it takes to accept a loss, mostly because accepting a loss means accepting the pain associated with the passing of our family and friends. It is tough, to say the least. This is why Peter and Drax are heroic. See, the two live in incredible anguish and have a grief that will never entirely go away. Yet Peter and Drax overcome the temptation to live in a fake reality where their loved ones still live, because ultimately they have a responsibility to save the galaxy. They must show strength and surmount their own tumultuous feelings in regards to their losses, and when they ultimately come out on top, Peter and Drax display their heroic worth. They battled their own complex feelings, won, and ended up stronger as a result, which is very inspiring and befits a game about superheroes in conflict with their grief and trauma. This character growth extends to the rest of the Guardians of the Galaxy as well. In fact, each member starts the game as being emotionally reserved and are less willing to cooperate and work as a team. But by the end of the game, all the Guardians of the Galaxy eventually open up, like me seeing someone wear a Slipknot shirt in public. It is quite the contrast. Throughout the game, Gamora must reckon with the fact that she killed her sister Nebula, Rocket must contend with his past trauma and claustrophobia, and Groot needs to figure out how he can be part of a family. And over the course of the game, these characters battle their internal pain and have strong hero moments where they overcome some of their more emotionally toxic behaviors, confront their various emotional hurts, and ultimately make meaningful contributions to the team. We see this when Rocket goes into a cramped space underwater in order to help the team defeat a dangerous adversary. We see this when Gamora opens up about killing her sister Nebula in hopes that no one sees her as a monster, and we see this with Groot when he realizes that the Guardians of the Galaxy are his family. A quirky, dysfunctional, and often morally unethical family. But hey, gotta work with what you got. And from there, the Guardians of the Galaxy flourish as a team. As each member confronts their own pain and triumphs over it, they all grow as people. In terms of the gameplay, they gain special combat abilities, and more importantly, they work better as a team. Where earlier on in the game, the Guardians of the Galaxy would have been frustrated with their tendency to bungle plans and missions, much like how America bungled the concept of healthcare, later on in the game, they view their antics and various fuck-ups as amusing, because they accept who they are, and to quote Gamora, It is so us. Furthermore, Marvel's Guardians of the Galaxy poses tough questions for its characters. Tough questions that have hard answers that often complicate these characters' respective places in the narrative. One of these instances revolves around how Peter Quill and Rocket are responsible for the release of the alien entity that's spreading throughout the galaxy and making people mentally live in an enticing make-believe reality while their physical bodies serve the Grand Unifier in order to further spread the alien entity throughout the galaxy as if they were the Church of COVID-19, the Pope of the Corona. While in the quarantine zone, which is a forbidden zone but in space, Quill and Rocket start a little friendly competition to see how many nests of space roaches they can destroy. Okay, they're not actually called space roaches, but whatever, they're space roaches. However, when destroying one of these nests, a yellow gem is dislodged and releases the aforementioned alien entity into the galaxy that starts a massive upheaval across the universe. In other words, people are killed and governments collapse, and it's kind of Star-Lord's and Rocket's fault here. While sure the two can't be held entirely responsible for the actions of a nefarious alien entity, it was their actions that led into the galaxy's plunge into anarchy. They bear at least some blame. And honestly, that's really interesting as far as narratives go. In most games or stories in general, the main protagonists generally are not at fault for the carnage of the antagonist, mostly because these stories don't want to give the audience a reason to view our heroes as being the culprit of others' suffering. But Marvel's Guardians of the Galaxy is different. By design, the narrative complicates the situation. It forces the players to reconcile the fact that our heroes may be complicit in the suffering of others, which is good storytelling. It makes the player grapple with the fact that the protagonists are imperfect, just like J.R.R. Tolkien's dry writing style. And honestly, that hits close to home. After all, everyone has made mistakes, some more than others, and in terms of Marvel's Guardians of the Galaxy, the fuck-up nature of these characters is especially resonant. In fact, heroes like Peter Quill, because of their fuck-ups, are more human compared to other superheroes because we can see our flawed selves in him. He represents the player, because we have all made mistakes as well. Peter Quill's nature as a prospective father is another one of the game's tough predicaments as well. Earlier on in the game, we are introduced to the character of Nikki, who is a young Kree girl and the daughter of Kor-El, a commander in the space cop force that we know as the Nova Corps that dies about midway through the game. And this is significant because Peter Quill had a romantic fling with Kor-El a few years prior to the start of this game. They had a time where they did a bit of human on Kree boinking action. And while sure Peter Quill is not the sharpest tool in the Home Depot, he was able to do the math and realize that he is potentially Nikki's father, that he could be her dad. And when Nikki is indoctrinated by the Universal Church of Truth and becomes a religious figure of the alien COVID Vatican, Peter has an extra incentive to save her because he thinks that she's probably his daughter. This is an interesting development. After all, Peter Quill is totally ill-equipped to be a dad, and the fact that Peter might potentially be Nikki's dad is an intriguing turn for Star-Lord. It is a nice narrative development. However, the story really lays it on thick that Peter Quill is her dad, so much so that you get the sense that it feels like a red herring, a fake out. And honestly, I didn't know how I felt about the game potentially pulling a Mari and revealing that Nikki is not Peter's daughter, mostly because Peter being a dad is a new development for people who are only familiar with Peter Quill through his Marvel Cinematic Universe adventures, none of which involve this potential narrative angle. And with that in mind, I liked the idea of Star-Lord being a father. But I eventually changed my mind on this. When it is ultimately revealed that Nikki isn't related to Star-Lord, it actually works to the benefit of the game. After all, the Guardians of the Galaxy as a franchise is about troubled people finding their chosen family and living a loving life amongst their friends. And truly, that's what Nikki and Star-Lord do at the end of the game. Sure, they may not be related by blood, but they are family regardless, which is a good message, especially for adopted kids, because their love and families are just as valid as those who are physically related, and in that way, it is wholesome. Ultimately, Marvel's Guardians of the Galaxy is an emotionally complicated game. It places its heroes in characters and predicaments that often aren't clear-cut. The game asks tough questions, just like Walter Cronkite. The protagonists have to vanquish their own personal and emotional demons that hold them back. They may have to reconcile the facts that they may bear some responsibility for potentially dooming the galaxy, and they need to realize that a chosen family is just as valid as one related by blood. And with that, Marvel's Guardians of the Galaxy soars. It is an emotionally complex game packaged inside an enjoyable sci-fi fantasy romp, which will ultimately be its legacy. See ya. And with that, that was the video. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed it, please leave a like rating, subscribe, ring the bell, share, and leave a comment telling me what you think of Marvel's Guardians of the Galaxy and its various themes. Also, please consider checking out my Patreon page. The link is in the description. And speaking of Patreon, I just want to thank my patrons, particularly my high-tier ones, and David, Samantha, Devlin, Mom, and Morgan. Thank you so much for supporting what I do. Love y'all.